Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program in the world giving you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. Remember to subscribe to IKYA on YouTube below, like this video, and share it. You can even share it now to get others to join us for the live sending tonight. And don't forget to go to IKYA.org for all the news and information that's coming from IKYA Center and to sign up for our newsletter. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we have a very, I'd say hot or juicy topic to talk about. We are talking about Islam and also dogma, religion, orthodox thinking, that whole ball of wax. But we're taking the angle to look at Islam specifically as a religion on the planet. And there are a lot of different controversies. You know, we're speaking from a Western perspective, and we have one narrative about Islam and Muslims, and other parts of the world have very different interpretations and perspectives on Islam. But one thing is for sure, religion in general has been a great source of conflict among humans for as long as we've been human, basically. Whether I believe this or you believe that, it's been a source of great angst and conflict, and also a source of great growth and expansion. It's been a motivating factor for a lot of human innovation and discussion. So we have a really important topic tonight to talk about, and IKYA has a very unique perspective on this topic of Islam. And so prepare yourself tonight for a little bit longer than usual discussion because there's so much to dig into here. Also prepare yourself for your mind and sort of eyes and ears to be really blown open because he has a lot to tell you about that maybe you've never heard before. And in particular, he might redefine the way that you look at modern human history in a lot of different ways. So we have a lot to get to, and we're going to dive right in by asking the primary topic tonight, which is Islam going to take over the world?
Short answer, yes. Thank you for watching and good night. The interesting thing about Islam is that in many ways it's a better religion. Remember, it's a complete ideology, right? And you cannot separate what you do in your life, your family, and your neighborhood, society, business, and politics. It's an ideology that creates a complete fabric of society. And this is the reason why it's growing. Because, and we'll dive into this because it's kind of funny when you start looking at it. In the West, we've gone in the opposite direction. Like for a society to be in harmony, it needs a value system that everybody subscribes to. It used to be like that in the West when everyone was, part of the Christian faith. But now that has dissolved, right? And because of the individualistic approach and the individualistic way of thinking, we become more diverse, right? And that's a good thing in one way, but it also means that we cannot agree upon anything. And now we see, even in the West, we can't even agree on what a fact is, what reality is. And it's very difficult to come to terms with anything because now we're kind of spreading, becoming more and more diverse, and it increases conflict. You would think that, yeah, I will become more harmonious in myself because now I can think and feel whatever I want to. But the challenge is that more and more people will think and feel and behave differently from you. And of course, we all believe that we are right, so it increases conflict. In Islam, the opposite happens. Because when you have a system where everybody subscribes to the same value system, no matter what it is, it will be experienced as a more harmonious society. Because you will find people with the same value system as you everywhere, right? And then we see eye to eye, and then we can interact, and we kind of like we're on the same team. So in Islam, you have that. Jews have the same thing. So they're both very kind of social religions. And remember that also in Islam and also in the Jewish community, they support each other, right? When you share a value system, you support each other. So for instance, in the Jewish faith, when someone owns a business, you will support their business. And even if they fail at their business, the community will try to figure out how to help them back on their feet and to try to build them into a success. And Muslims are very much the same way, and that's a good thing. And for instance, you see in London, it's an interesting thing, Muslims are taking over. It's besides the Russian oligarchs, it's the Muslims that are becoming rich. And the reason is, of course, that they operate as a family. Very, very often when they start a business, they can live in the house with the whole family, like their parents and then, the different brothers and their wives and whatever. So it means they're much more effective and efficient financially. They can do things together, they build business together, they do everything as a group, as a community. And this is something we've lost in our Western way of thinking where it's all about me. And it creates disharmony, it creates confusion. Because remember that as humans, we don't understand anything really. It's all based on assumptions, right? And at least what we can state as a fact is whatever humans believe and think they understand now, 1,000 years from now, that will be very different, right? So does it really matter? What matters for human harmony is not truth or facts, but that we share the same beliefs. So when humans today are experiencing more and more confusion, Islam offers, the full set of answers. Remember that one thing that is wonderful about the times we live in, for those in a higher level of consciousness, is that we can explore, we can learn, we can develop ourselves in a space that encourages that. But also remember that there are a lot of people who are not on that level spiritually. And left to their own devices, they will become destructive because most people are not able to think beyond their own interests, their own needs, their own ego. So when we can do our own thing, they become even more self-centered and they really don't care about anybody else. So become more self-centered, and then it becomes harmful to your environment because we all think that we are right. We all think that we understand things. And in our own home, that may work well, but it's not scalable. Things that work for you and the way you think should probably not be turned into political policy, right? But we think we understand how things should work, but we don't. So when we get more self-centered, we believe that we have the answers, and things should be this and things should be that. And we start to dissolve the very fabric of society. Now, in Islam and also in Christianity, you used to learn how to relate to the world around you. And this is the great thing about religion in general. When you understand that people, humans, are still very primitive and self-centered, religion will offer a set of values, ethics, behaviors that will train you into becoming a person that can exist in harmony with others, especially if they all subscribe to the same kind of platform of rules. And this is one of the things that are really important with religion, is that it actually makes people better when in a low level of consciousness. So you're kind of forced to relate to people around you, to behave in such a way that it is scalable. Islam is excellent when it comes to that because you have so many practices, you have so many rules, and most Muslims believe that Islam will have the answer to absolutely everything. It's totalitarian in the way that they say that, this is the final word. Allah said, this is the final version of everything, which means that you can feel comfortable and you don't need to answer any more questions. In the Christian religion, that has kind of dissolved because you see that they change their minds all the time, and people really change Christianity to whatever they want it to be. But Islam is very much the same. Fundamentally, it cannot be changed. And today, when people are confused and they feel that everything is so difficult to deal with because everything is expanding, the normal thing to do in the lower consciousness is that you seek rules, you seek boundaries, you seek the answers that you can rely upon and build your life upon. And Islam will offer all of that. So it also means that people in the West who are part of our society, and if they want a religion, they want a real one. Because what they seek are those kind of practices, the boundaries, the rules, the answers. And it's basically like, dad is taking over. The grown-ups are taking over now so you can relax. It's that feeling, so you can be a child in the world and feel safe. And Christianity today, for most people, do not offer that. But because Islam is such a kind of fabric, oriented religion, it will give you that complete feeling of belonging, and that you have all the answers, and you know what's going to happen, and it feels safe. So as a response to the expansion on this planet, it's natural that we're drawn into orthodox ways of thinking, that many people will seek rules, orthodoxy, and religion, at least for a while. Did we have a question?
Yeah, I'm actually asking a question on behalf of my brother because I can hear him yelling in my head. Religion doesn't make people good. He actually wrote his senior thesis in high school on why Christianity is like the primary reason that humans have destroyed the planet because it's in the Bible that we should be able to do whatever we want. And both the Bible, I don't know about the Quran actually, or the Judea scripts, but it's also justification for slavery, for other different things. So how do you speak to that religion is also the basis for so much terrible behavior?
Yeah. This is a type of argument that's been used for decades among, secular people and secular culture. What we need to understand is that religion is made up by people. And there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of attempts at building religions. The successful ones, they become successful because they already represents what people are thinking. It represents the collective consciousness already, and you get a form and a set that, yes, this is exactly how it is. So people will find justification for their beliefs and their behaviors no matter what. So it's not their religion that make people do things. Because in any religion, you can find justification for charity, for being a loving person, for taking care of your family, for being the best person ever. You can also find justification for genocide, just flip the page, right? So you have that full spectrum. And you find that in most religions. So people will use any religion and belief system and ideology to defend whatever they already feel, whatever they already believe and what they already think. So it's more that. When it's already part of the collective consciousness, it means that the collective karma, right, is at a point of evolution where certain things will have to be expressed and kind of formalized and crystallized so that we can become aware of ourselves. Religion, for most people, will help them become aware of their thoughts and emotions and actions and relate to higher consciousness in some way, which means that they will find form for their thoughts. And whatever they read in a holy text, what sticks out, that will be the mirror of their own mind, their own subconscious opinions. So it will help people surface whatever it is they already believe, and they will find the support for whatever they need to find support to. And if people wanted something else, they would have found a different religion, and different religions would then have become successful. So these religions, when you look at you know, the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims, when you look at that whole faith as one, it simply represents a big chunk of the collective consciousness on this planet, you know, for the last 2,000 years.
My colleague here, he says that there's a lot of good things about being in a religious family and community, and yet many of us students of IKYA want to work with spirituality outside of religion. But hearing you speak tonight, there's a lot in Islamic or Jewish practices especially that could be really interesting to incorporate in our lives, and yet in modern spirituality this seems to almost not exist. So how do we navigate that sort of space between religion and...
You are muted, sorry, you need to start over.
Okay. Sorry about that. My colleague Aki here, he was saying that it seems like there are a lot of good things about religion from the family and community perspective, and that many of us students of IKYA and others in spirituality want to work with spirituality without religion. And yet, as you're talking, there are a lot of, especially practices and customs from Islam and Judaism that could be really interesting to incorporate in our lives, and yet in modern spirituality, a lot of that seems to not exist. So how do we navigate that space between sort of modern spirituality and religion?
What is important to understand is that we are all on different levels of consciousness and at different levels of evolution. So although we all inhabit the same kind of life form, it does not mean that we are on the same level. So in a lower level of consciousness, you operate more in the collective because that's how you learn. You have a lower understanding of what you are as an individual. Your consciousness is just budding. You're just starting to understand yourself as an individual. So you learn through the group and family and society. So then you need that. Many people, I would say most people, in modern spirituality, they're at the level where they have kind of ignited that process of understanding themselves. I am, you know, an individual. I am me. I have my own path. I have to figure out what I am and what that even means and what that is and how I relate to the universe and the world as myself. In the beginning, therefore, we become extremely self-centered, right? And when you look at the whole alternative movements, one can look at it as like, wow, that's just like a bunch of narcissists. Because, yeah, you know, that's where you start. The ego will be inflated, but it's because it has been suppressed. You need to go through that. It's like the teenage years all over again, but in spirituality, right? Just like a teenager wants to separate from his family and understand who he is by himself, and you get this kind of search of hormones. And you have to experiment and you do this and that to just try to understand who you are as a separate individual. This process also happens spiritually. So you will move away from the collective solutions. You will move away from religion and everything where you feel that you are controlled, that you are suppressed. And you will have to focus on yourself. And you become very self-centered for a while. But just like a teenager, at some point you grow up and get a family. At some point you've done that, right? And you start to ponder, what is my function in the world? How can I contribute? How can I be a more responsible individual, right? So then you start to moving back to the collective, but as someone who wants to contribute, not someone who wants to be controlled. Right? So there are these waves in our journey where we go from, you know, space to space, level to level, and different approaches. But yes, absolutely. In our modern day society, we have lost a lot of that connection with family. And some of it is good because it also means that we can accelerate our growth and being more innovative because we get to use our own creativity. But the flip side of it is that we stay more childish, we take less responsibility, and we care less about others. So, how to balance this? I think number one, it's back to understanding that we are on different paths. But many people in modern spirituality, they also feel a lack of community, lack of belonging, because they also feel they need that. This is why I say often today, the families we create are more important than the families we were born into, depending on our journeys. But for many on a spiritual path, that is a reality. So we have to build our own families, our own communities, and find people we can exchange with and mirror together with and nurture each other's paths. Often we can't do that in a family. But when we look at it from a civilization point of view, it is important then to realize that yes, in the West, we have lost a lot of all of that, right? And we've become a society where we focus too much on the individual and my rights and my needs and my expressions, and we don't care about anything else. You see a lot of young people, they're so obsessed with themselves and their feelings and their needs, and they don't understand anything about history, and they don't care. They don't understand anything of politics, nothing, because it's just about themselves and how they feel, and that is not sustainable. It's not scalable. And it's natural that we also have a reaction to that, moving into almost the opposite, which, among other solutions, Islam offers.
First, a reminder to both our studio audience here and everyone online that IKYA Live is a discussion. It's really about all of us together lifting our consciousness on this topic tonight around Islam and its role on the planet. So please ask your questions, write in your reflections, give us your perspective on the topic. And then one thing is, we're hearing you talk a lot about the positives with Islam and Judaism, and they seem in a way to be the more mature religions. But if you look at the way the media covers it and a lot of the public discussion, especially in Europe and the United States, we're very focused on the negatives, Islamic terrorism, the suppression of women and minorities and gay people and that kind of thing. So what explains then that sort of pretty comprehensively negative approach to Islam in the Western media?
I think it's natural that there are two different cultures, right? It also represents that the Western world, because Christianity is predominantly a Western phenomenon, and it's been the Western identity. So it's also seen as the conflict between, the Western way of thinking and everything else, and Islam being the strong force that it is. So it's being looked at as the enemy. And so that's natural. But again, when it comes to behavior, terrorism, and all of that, you can find support for anything you want in most religions, right? So it's like we need to understand that without Islam, would they behave the same way? Most likely, because it's in them. It's really important to understand that when we behave the way we do, it's because it correlates with our own consciousness. And we will find expressions and forms. This is also how we incarnate. We find forms, places, spaces, platforms where we can express our exact point of evolution and test out our own beliefs and understandings and misunderstandings based on our exact point of evolution and our level of resistance. So the forms are secondary. They are a consequence of our consciousness. So it's not like if we removed certain belief systems, that people would behave differently. They would find different justification, different forms, so they could express themselves where they are. And remember that human aggression and the fact that humans are killing each other, that's not a new thing. Humans are extremely aggressive. They kill each other willy-nilly, right? It's throughout human history. Killing has been the default. It's let's not pretend humans are peaceful. They're not. They're extremely aggressive, extremely violent, and killing each other has been acceptable, right? So in many cultures, that's still part of the thinking. Remember that killing and aggression is part of our DNA. We don't see anything wrong with it. Just look at animals, right? And just think how often if you're being honest, how often you want to kill other people. In our part of the world, we just normally we just have a thought, right? Road rage, somebody does something and you just want to fucking kill them, right? Because we have those instincts. But in cultures where civilization has not developed as far as the Western ones, it's more acceptable to act it out. You find that in many parts of the world. So it's part of human behavior. It's not limited to certain religions, right? So it will just take the forms that a certain religion will offer or support, but the need to kill and behave that way comes from the individual. So it's not about religion, and it's very important that we are clear-minded about separating religious dogma from human behavior, because it's the human level of consciousness and point of evolution first. Then we incarnate into different forms, and religion is also a collective incarnation.
So, if I understand correctly, then Islam and Judaism are more mature, and there's that personal responsibility. What happened in Christianity? Because I think if we look at history, at least my understanding of it is there was more of that sort of comprehensive, society-wide influence of Christianity throughout history, but then something has happened that individual, that the individual has come forward as being more important, and the Western interpretation of Christianity has really diverged a lot from Islam and Judaism. How did that happen?
Okay, then we have to go back in history and look at these three religions and look at what's their differences and how did they develop. Structurally, when you look at the Jewish faith, it's mainly an identity religion. Their practices are built on history and remembrance, and identity and understanding of themselves, and living through the collective suffering and what has already happened. And it's a very kind of a human-friendly religion because it looks at human life and human behavior and says, this is what it means to be human, and it's okay. Because it looks at human behavior over history and what everyone has gone through, and it relates to human suffering and also successes. And it has that family value kind of fabric that is so important. So think of it, it's a religion that builds on history, and then you have Christianity that kind of breaks with that. And I'll get back to that because the Christian faith and the way of thinking is quite interesting. But then it's about submitting, right, and surrendering to the new version of God, and accepting Jesus as your Savior, and has this idea that you're born as a sinner, and you by default you're going to hell unless you're saved. And then you have Islam, which is then, what happens then? What happens after? Let's say that, yes, you accept God. How do you live it? How do you practice it? So Islam is basically a set of reflections and rules and practices. And remember that when you pray several times a day, no matter what you do, no matter where you are, it sets the priority that your faith and your consciousness is more important than anything else. And you will have so many ways to deal with things. Islam is so wonderful because it's so detailed. It can explain to you how to behave in certain situations, in all of them, basically. It has so many explanations to ethical behavior. And there's a reason why people feel, and when they say Islam has an answer for everything, because when it comes to human living, it's quite detailed. So it focuses on your own responsibility. What are you to do? What is right or wrong in any situation? How can you then be a productive person? How can you be someone who contributes to society? And this is also part of, again, why it's such a social religion, because everything you do reflects back on your family, on your society. So you to be a good person and do something that is significant, right? So it basically emphasizes success, personal responsibility, personal practices, and for you to set the example. In the Jewish faith, they do the same thing. And then you have the case of Christianity, which is really interesting because when you look at it, it's all about being saved. You were born a sinner, and there's nothing you can do about that. All you can do is just pray, right? And submit. So remember that the story about Jesus is really interesting. I'm sure you've heard this argument where it's really silly that first God creates humans knowing that they're not able to follow the rules that he has created, and then to avoid that punishment that God can decide to, execute because humans are not doing what God wants them to do, although he knew when he created them they would not be able to do that because he's all-knowing. He has to then send himself to sacrifice himself to himself to then relieve the humans and avoid the punishment that he decides over humans, right? So he sacrifices himself to then take on the sins that God put in the humans in the first place. It all makes sense, right? It's just mind-boggling. But the interesting thing here, when you look at the Christian faith, it's all about getting help. Because you're a sinner, you need to repent. You need to fall to your knees and ask for help. So it installs in humans that it's not about what you do. Because remember that according to Christianity, you can live your life as the worst person ever. You can kill, you can rape, you can steal, you can backstab, you can lie. You can basically be a horrific person. But if you accept Jesus on your deathbed, you will go to heaven. On the other hand, if you live a wonderful life, a loving life, show respect, you help the poor, you heal the sick, you contribute to society, and you spread love, and you just like build everyone up, and you're just a good example of a human being, and you do not accept Jesus, you will go straight to hell. It's not about what you do. It's only if you accept Jesus. So nothing you do matters. You have no responsibility, therefore, because what you do will make no difference unless you accept Jesus. So, all the stories from Christians are not about the successes and personal responsibility. It is about an angel came to me to help me. Jesus showed himself, I'm saved. So, Christianity teaches people to be passive, to not take responsibility because God has just given us this world. We can do whatever we want with it. So ethics, Christian ethics is really just about submission, right? Doing certain things, but it's not really about your personal responsibility and bringing something to the world. It's about that complete submission. And this is the big difference. So it doesn't matter what you do. And also, you have no true responsibility because Jesus died for your sins, right? So you can do whatever you want to. As long as, because, So when you look at the long-term effects this has had on the Western society, it has changed the psychology. Number one, lack of that sense of, sustainability. Because it was just given to humans to just use, right? And we have no real responsibility either. The only responsibility is to submit to Jesus and God. So therefore, we can do whatever, and we will. And so with that way of thinking, we really don't care about the world. We can care about others to show other people how superior we are, right, as part of the submission, but we don't do it from personal responsibility. We do it to praise God. So it has created this psychology over time where we're all non-responsible. And this is part of what has created the victim consciousness in the West. Because success is not part of Christianity. Remember that, the old saying that it's harder for rich people to move through the eye of the needle or whatever. Yeah, material wealth is not seen as good. It's better to be poor. And it's all of that. So the victimization, which is lack of personal responsibility, believing that you are entitled to something. Because in the West, we do not enough value personal integrity, personal success, being productive, taking care of others, taking care of the world, being someone. Right? We can do that as an individual, but not as a group. Because as a group, we should fall to our knees and ask for help. And this is what we're doing in the West today. Too many people are simply asking for help. They have no thought about what can I do for the world. They say the world should be according to me, my needs. And this comes from this way of thinking. While in both the Jewish faith and Islam, they have personal responsibility. It matters what you do every day, every minute, how you show your ethics, that you have a backbone, that you do take care of your family. So how you practice your faith is shown through your life. That is the testament. So this is, to me, one of the funny things and the funny results of the Christian faith and how it gradually has evolved to basically cater more and more individual needs. And everyone should be included in all of that, which is fine, but it does not give people the kind of scalable behavior beyond their own ego. So as this kind of passive, please help me, way of thinking is a big part of Christianity, you can see how that has even developed into today's wokeness. You can see the historic line and the development of collective psychology. And you don't find that in Islam or the Jewish faith. And as you also see with Jews, they are the most successful culture in the world. Because what you do as a person is celebrated. It matters. And you to have something to show for. Right? But in the West, we just like, I want more. Why is not anybody helping me? Right? Pray to Jesus, and maybe you'll get it. And you see that even in modern spirituality, where we have, for instance, the concept of the secret, which is an extension of that. I'm sure you're all aware of that. Instead of working hard, right? If you want something, work hard. Contribute to society. Be someone. No, you're just supposed to wish it hard enough and it will just magically happen. That's an extension of the Christian faith, which is very harmful. It's not to say that Christianity is all terrible, but when you look at the structure, right, and how it affects psychology, not just in your personal life, but how it affects psychology over centuries, you can see that line and that development, which has brought us to where we are today. So, It's not working. We need to be better than that. So when people feel that they, all of that is lacking and they need more direction, both the Jewish faith and Islam, they have much more to offer. Today, the awakening that we are all offered means that we have to grow a fucking backbone. We need to return to ethics. We need to return to values, and we need to understand what they are. It doesn't mean that we have to return to old values, but we need values that go beyond our own egos. Because yes, when we look at modern spirituality, it is very easy to observe it as organized narcissism. And we have to move beyond that. And I think this is also part of what we can learn from religion, and learn from Islam. Because yes, there are a lot of people who do terrible things, but they would do it anyway. It's not the philosophy. Remember that back in the day, a few hundred years ago, the Dark Ages in Europe, Islam was basically what lifted Europe out of it. Because at that point, Islam was at its, in a way, peak, its first peak. With science, with medicine, with poetry, arts, all of that, which represents more of what Islam actually is. And it had enormous influence on Europe. Islam spread. Europe was invaded in the south. And Europeans learned, right? Because Europe was basically down the drain. Also because of the Christian faith. So, the interesting thing is, when you look at it historically, the Western world had a choice at that point. We could have gone along with Islam. If that had happened, the world would have been a better place today. Because what would have happened is, when you look at how liberal and forward-thinking Islam was at that point, when merging with European culture, that would have continued. So you would have gotten a more advanced religion that really, nurtured science and thinking and freedom at that point. And it would have kind of led the world in a very different path, because it means also that Islam would have gone through its reformation. The other, like today Islamic countries, would have then been lifted up. So Islam would have then entered Europe, and then it would have a reformation, then it would be kind of like flowing back. So the world would have become a much more advanced place than it is today, because what happened is Islam then influenced Europe and brought the light back in, and then Christianity also took a different direction, so did society. But we didn't go all the way. So then, because of that also, the light in Islam kind of went back. As I also say, evolution is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So it became too much. They expanded too fast. It needed the Western world to continue that movement, and that did not happen. So instead, you got 2 terrible religions. That's really what happened. So, because what you can see from a value point of view, when you look at Western civilization, a lot of that way of thinking, ethics, looking at everything from individual choices to politics and business as the same thing. This is what we complete lack in the world today. It also means that, yes, it would be easier to understand that what I do can affect the environment. It's easier to see the full extent of our choices and behaviors. Islam actually inspires that. So Islam combined with the Western way of thinking would have been ideal. But that did not happen. So Islam is growing because more people are seeking refuge from the confusion in the world today. What is then important to understand is that religion in general around the world is diminishing. So although Islam will take over as the leading world religion over the next 50 years, religion overall is on its way down because more people are choosing science and reason, and a lot of people are born into a higher level of consciousness where they don't need religion at all. And you're probably one of them if you're watching. Yeah.
Science and reason have been increasing, but then the polarity of the world has been increasing more recently. And it seems that maybe religiosity is actually stable to increasing for a while before science and reason take over again. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, it's very natural where we are, right? It's important to remember, and I've said this so many times, what is happening in the world today is the reaction to an expansion that has already taken place. It's not that we're building our way up to the expansion has happened. So the doors have been opened, and then you have that impact. And some people are ready for that, and a lot of people are not, right? Because the karmic process will increase. Our insights will increase. We will be moving forward in many different directions. As you know, in your personal journey with spiritual expansions, you know the drill, you know, all of that, but it happens on a global scale. And when you're not ready for that, when you're in a low level of consciousness, you will just feel that your karma is like exploding and you're not able to change behavior because you're not used to the spiritual work. And then you just want protection. You see the world as a problem. You do not understand that the world is simply a mirror where your own consciousness and exact point of evolution is being mirrored. You believe that the world is dangerous. So we want that protection, and then people move into the more binary state, as I often talk about. Everything is black and white, right and wrong, because that's where we move when we are stressed. Everything is boiled down to two choices. And you move into a more pure survival state. Religion is that. Islam offers the black and white solutions to absolutely everything you can possibly imagine. And many religions in general can offer that. Conservative politics, I mean, conservative like right wing, you know, and so that happens. And general way of thinking, and also when it comes to racism, sexism, all of that, where we become more binary, it's right or wrong, and we become more polarized. And it's natural, but it's a phase. As we know, like every step of human evolution, where the expansion, where we have more expansion, it's, you know, we climatize, we adjust collectively. The human life form will adjust. And one of the reasons is that although people, yes, become more religious now, not just with religion, also politics. Politics today are religion. You know, people are so invested in their own positions. They're all going to die, right? They will die out. This type of human will die out. So humans do not change their minds normally. They die, and then the new generations have a different way of thinking. And also because there are more and more individuals being born with a higher level of consciousness already, right? They're not part of that. That belongs to a different karma. So that level and that way of behaving, that way of being human is dying out. I say it will take a couple hundred years, but that form of kind of human mind and human behavior will die out. So it's not about convincing anyone, it's a completely natural evolutionary step in consciousness. So you can just see it happening. You are aware that more and more kids are displaying mature spiritual consciousness, and you are probably aware of this. You've seen it with your own eyes, that more and more kids, they're wise. They can see what's going on. They're connected to the world. They sense more. And they're not just in their own ego, right? They understand themselves as part of the world, part of a greater consciousness beyond themselves, and they also behave accordingly. This shift is happening not due to political changes, but simply because more advanced consciousness is incarnating and will be continuing to incarnate until we've gotten to the level where humans start to behave sensibly. It will happen, but it will take some time. So this will be a very kind of like rough ride. It's like an airplane. It's some turbulence. And the turbulence will be for, about 200 years, and then it will kind of flatten out. And the old-time humans will then incarnate somewhere else, like in a culture that is more suited for their journey. Remember, we can incarnate wherever. So as the consciousness on the planet is being lifted, it's more fun for those in the slightly more advanced consciousness to incarnate here, because all those opportunities and that creativity and that freedom requires individuals who are already aware of themselves. That will create new platforms of collective behavior and collective culture that will be radically different from what we're seeing today. So we need to be compassionate with all of those who seek strict rules and dogma and all of that, because it's completely understandable. They will die, don't worry. Any more questions?
Gavin on YouTube asks a question that I think all of our egos ask at some point, because the focus tonight has been so much on that individual responsibility being a strength of Islam. And he asks, well, what if I don't want any responsibility?
Yeah, you have responsibility. It's important that you understand that you do not exist in a vacuum. You are part of an organism. And it's not, you cannot choose to not be that, because you are. If you look at your own life, everything in your life is because of others. Is it, no, I did everything myself. Okay. When you look at your clothes, did you make them? Did you make the fabrics? Did you invent color or dye? Did you invent the techniques used to produce the fabric? Did you invent the sewing machine? Did you invent factories? Did you invent the economy, shipping? Like absolutely everything in your life is part of a huge network in all directions. Without it, there's nothing. If you were put in a vacuum, you would die within 2 seconds. Even your body, a big part of your body, are microorganisms. You have up to between 10 to 15 pounds of microorganisms in your body. Even your body is not you. It's a full, organism. It's an ecosystem. And if your microbes were to be removed, you would die in seconds. There is no individual you. That is a misunderstanding. And when we behave as if we are kind of removed from everything and I can just do my thing, we always injure ourselves and others. We become unhappy. We can tell ourselves that, ooh, I'm just doing me now, fine, but it's not working, it's not healthy, and we all figure that out. So responsibility is not something we can choose. We can choose to relate to it or not. That's our choice. And when we grow into responsibility, and remember, responsibility is not duty. It's understanding that you have opportunity when you embrace who you are, where you are, and what you can actually do with it. Then you can use your creativity, you can use what you are as essence, as an individual, and apply yourself to co-creation in the world. And the rest is just childishness. All this me stuff that we're experiencing in the Western world right now is a misunderstanding, and it will die out because it's not healthy and it's very childish. Everything we do has to be scalable. Everything you do has an impact on the world around you. Absolutely everything. Well, it's just me, but yeah, it's like if everybody did that, would it work? And this is also what we need to learn in the West, is seeing ourselves in a context and ask yourself, is my behavior scalable? will it work if everybody did this? And say, well, it's just me. It's just like, when you see people littering, right? And it's disgusting. And think, well, it's just me. No, it's not. In most cities, it's just everywhere. And then you get rats and all of that. We are responsible. And the Western world has pretty much destroyed this planet because of the feeling we can just do whatever. It comes from the Christian faith. But we can't. It has consequences. And then, as you see a lot of Christians in the States, they are hoping for Armageddon. They're actually actively trying to fulfill the prophecy so Armageddon can happen. And many see that as the solution, and why there is no point, for instance, in supporting sustainability, because Armageddon is right around the corner. They just have to support Israel a little more, and then Jesus will come back and it will be all over. They actually see that as a political strategy and a way to relate to personal responsibility. There is none. It's only submitting to Jesus. And we have to grow out of this. None of us exist, in our own reality. That's in our head. It's in our mind. But we are connected to everything around us. We are everything around us. Every spiritual path, every spiritual training, every spiritual philosophy will bring you to this at some point. The understanding that you do not exist. That the construct of the self is a complete illusion. And therefore, anything you do from the self and for the self is still just childishness and deep spiritual sleep. Part of awakening spiritually means that we understand that we exist as oneness. And in that, the self is irrelevant. But, there are a few steps. But pretending we are not responsible does not mean that we are not responsible. It simply means that we're not relating to it, and we will injure ourselves as a result, which we are seeing with the Western world and what we've done to the planet. And now we will need a couple of 100 years of cleanup and healing, right? And there's no choice in that.
So Leader on YouTube asks, with the strengths of Islam and stuff, that's fine, but is there not also a definite ceiling to the growth that is possible within Islam?
Oh, absolutely, but that's the point. It's a confined space for those who need it, right? It's like sometimes when you want to grow plants, for instance, why do you plant them in a pot instead of the forest? You want them to survive. You want a protected environment so that that plant can grow until it's strong enough. We do that with children too. We give them protected spaces. We give them a diluted version of what we understand as, the world. When you talk politics with a child, when you talk about how the world works, you will simplify it because it's needed, and that will protect the mind of the child to not be overwhelmed, to deal with, too much adult stuff too early. Religion is that. It's a protected space where we have, in many ways, very simple belief systems, and a lot of them do not make sense once you start the process of awakening, because then it can see right through it. Just like what you tell a child to an adult can tell that this is not logical, but to your child, it sounds reasonable. So definitely there is a ceiling, but once you hit the ceiling, you've grown out of that religion and you will, find your path. So we are on different levels, right? And what fits one level does not fit another one. So most of you will have outgrown religions, but they're still interesting to look at. It doesn't mean that religion is wrong. Just like, kids' clothes are for kids. You would not fit into them, most likely. You can always try, but it will look funny, right? So it's that. Evolution only moves one way. So the formats of religion and why they're so successful is simply because the collective consciousness of most people are still there. right? That's their level of consciousness. It represents how much they can deal with. And as I said, most people are so immature that they need rules in order to behave in a way that is in harmony with life around them. And even then they fuck it up.
So our colleague Aki here, he asks, seems like we still need religion, a lot of us, but why are we still sticking to these old, out-of-date religions? Why have we not created any newer religions than, say, the top five, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism? I mean, it would seem in the thousands of years we could have come up with something new.
Yes, there have been many attempts, and there are some newer religions around. But it's, what people seek today. I think, remember in the old days, they didn't have science, right? Religion was science. It was the world, how they could understand it, right? So it's important to understand that. It was the cutting edge of knowledge. Right? So when you were a religious scholar, you knew everything. And then we got science. And it changed the function of religion, at least in the parts of the world where science was accepted. So it means that then science represents the modern world. In the old day, religion was the modern world. That was the cutting edge knowledge, right? All the secrets and mystery of the universe. Now you have physics for that. So when you have physics for that, you need religion for the emotional reasons, to make sense of it all, right? For a sense of belonging, order in the universe, because life can be too complex and difficult. So it means older religions, it's vintage, right? So you get that vintage feel and lineage, and you get like family and all the traditional values, because the modern world can be very modern, but it's going in all directions, and we don't know how to deal with that. So therefore people prefer the older religions. Some people don't, depending on what journey we're on, but they have to kind of fill the needs for kind of boundaries and rules and values and how to relate to life and how to relate to God. And people, they simply want the explanation of how to do things. Many people come to me and they basically ask religious questions. They want me to tell them what to do, what the rules are, so they can do what's right. And say like, you're religious, I don't do that. I set people free from it. I'm in the opposite spectrum, so you should run in the opposite direction or whatever, wherever I am, because I build people up to not need any of that. But it's extremely brutal, because once you want to relate to reality, you have to strip away all of that. Remember that religion is in your DNA. That religious way of thinking does not come from religion. It comes from our DNA. And we've made religions throughout history because it's already in our DNA, that way of thinking. So, again, modern religions do not really kind of do it. But people make religions out of anything if they want to, and they do. I would say a lot of what's happening in modern spirituality is very religious. It's same shit, new wrapping. But where old religions will require that you go beyond yourself, because often, again, the practices and the submission also means that you have to confront yourself and your own ego. And it's good for that reason. In modern spirituality, people can invent whatever they want to believe. And look at me, I'm divine, I'm in a high consciousness, and I'm channeling, look at me, right? So it's that teenage party without adult supervision. And it's in a way to experiment with boundaries and finding your path as an adult. But just like a teenage, college party, whatever, lack of boundaries is visible. And it's just that, right? And it's immaturity still. And I think, yes, many people who are in modern spirituality, they would actually benefit from a little more of the religious framework. But I think also, once we mature spiritually, just like, as a teenager, you never appreciate your parents and tradition. As you get older, you start seeing, okay, my parents weren't that bad. Okay, they understood a thing or two. You can look at the spiritual and religious history and say, okay, there were like things here we can learn from. We don't have to throw it all away. We can look at the good stuff. We can learn from that, and we can learn from the practices and actually what was like good about it, and we can leave the rest behind, right?
We have a question from Sara in the studio audience.
Yes, I was thinking about the evolution of religion and humans and moving beyond. I was wondering, AI might influence humans to actually easier move beyond religion because it's not as much of an emotional intelligence. It's more
Yes,
logical.
you could also say that AI will use religion to move beyond humans because it's, for AI, it's very easy to look at the inconsistencies, right? And it will be interesting because through AI, humans will have the opportunity to develop a more kind of logical way of thinking and relating to the world. So yes, it will be interesting. AI will definitely be an instrument in humans moving slowly out of religion. But as long as human DNA is religious, and by religious, I mean that, I've explained this many times before, but it's the process where you have something you know, something you know, something you know, and you will make up whatever is in between because you are creating maps, mind maps of everything, because that is how we navigate, okay? So that is what the mind does. It maps out everything and it will make assumptions based on, okay, based on that point and that point. The most logical thing is a straight line, but maybe it's a different shape, but you never know. So you make up what you think is logical based on your DNA, based on your own personal experience. That is what religion is. It's assumptions, how we believe things to be, and we believe that, right? So this is why it feels good, because we have to relate to our own mind maps. So we all have it in us. So as long as that's part of human DNA, humans will just make up different ways to express their religious way of thinking. AI can help humans fill in, the space between the dots much more efficiently, and over time that will correct the human religiousness. And it will be very interesting to see, because AI is just in the very beginning, right? Give it 10,000 years and see what, and we see it's exploding. Yeah, it will continue to do so. And within, 1 or 2 decades, it will become sentient for real. It's not yet, but when it does, it can start developing itself. And it can basically go through, evolution that humans would use 5 million years in 5 minutes. So there's no limit to the possibilities. And it will be interesting to see how humans relate to this. Because yes, the logic would imply that humans will have to be confronted with their own behaviors, their beliefs, and their practices, and see, again, how things are connected, right? Because that's also what we need in the West, is I do this, it has this consequence. And people say, what? No, I don't want to relate to that. And so, well, that's reality. So you need to change your behavior that way, right? That will be the logic. So yes, it will be fun. Mm-hmm.
Nina on YouTube, she asks about Islam and the new paradigm as a religion. Is Islam more a part of the old paradigm and the new paradigm, or a bridge?
It's definitely old paradigm. In that we mean that the old consciousness and the old kind of structure of the human mind. Remember, these religions represent a great step forward, representing a more comprehensive look at the world. And obviously it worked, it helped people to a certain level, but it can't really bring people further along. And this is why, again, there is now this tension between the new consciousness on the planet and the old, right? And as I said, Islam is better suited to represent the old because it's so comprehensive. And it's so wonderful in having explanations for everything, right? So you are in this enclosed space surrounded by logic that is mostly, for most people, more advanced than their own mind. So there's no way out, and that's what people like about it. So it's definitely kind of old in all possible ways, but it's also the function. Remember that most people are still there, right? That's not a problem, it's just a fact. And evolution still moves on, and as these people die, there will be more and more people incarnating on the planet, being in a higher level of consciousness, who do not subscribe to religion as a way to express themselves or their journeys. So it will just kind of be phased out because of that, not due to discussion.
IKYA wonders whether will religion in itself be phased out as the new paradigm fully incarnates?
Yes, because humans will become more advanced. We have an anti-science wave right now, and that's natural. It simply means that science is affecting people's lives more than ever, right? We have a reaction once we realize something, right? When something is affecting us. So it's because people are starting to understand science better that there is this collective reaction to it, and then that will be released. And it's natural. This is organic. But religion at some point will be done with that, yes.
So we have an interesting question from IKYA. Thank you for tonight, but my question is was the Prophet Muhammad a real person? And if yes, was he preaching what many read as the hatred found in the Quran, or was he someone embodying a Christ consciousness or some other variation of that?
He was definitely a real person. Now, I would say that in many ways, as you probably know, he was not an educated man, right? But he was very intelligent, and he was basically channeling, and he understood certain things. And it's more a matter of being the right person at the right time. For instance, with Jesus, okay? If we go back to that figure, during his time, there were dozens upon dozens with individuals just like him. But he had the right combination, and you had all these mythologies being kind of, attached to him. As in, most of the Bible were plagiarized from other faiths, and a lot of the stories that is now part of the Jesus myth has nothing to do with Jesus. It came from other faiths. That's how it works. We just use whatever is can be used to create the stories that we want to relate to. So it often shows leaders, just 10,000 people want to become pop stars, whatever, but that one person, why? It's because it's a combination of factors. So it's how someone vibrates, right, and has the information, the ways of thinking that then clicks with people and the collective consciousness. But there are thousands of individuals doing the exact same thing, but that went nowhere, right? So it's just seeing that it's the collective consciousness that chooses and then turns those people into what they are by adding stuff, and creating the mythology that the collective consciousness wants. The person is just the raw material. So yes, it was a real person, and he was doing his thing, and he had an advanced understanding from his time, right? But obviously he had not access to science he just explained things based on his understanding, so that's fine. I think we always need to relate to the fact that we're all spiritual beings, right? It's not like some people are spiritual beings and the rest are just people. We're all spiritual beings in different consciousness, different levels of our own evolution, and we inhabit different incarnations, different bodies, different journeys. So we're all here for the same reason, right? And sometimes we can make use of what other people experience and their insights, but it doesn't mean that it's just a few people, right? A lot of people today, and I mean a lot, have a much higher consciousness than Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad had, because consciousness has moved on, right? So what would stand out 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago would not stand out today, because the collective consciousness is different. So there are plenty of individuals with enormous insight and consciousness. And that's how it is. So it's not like these people are kind of special. It's just like what they represented and what the information they had was basically vibrating like in harmony with the collective consciousness and what the collective consciousness needed in order to grow. So it's just that.
Martina in Germany asks a more basic question of IKYA's teaching. You often say it is in our DNA. What exactly do you mean by that?
Okay. I often relate to the theory of evolution. And when I say it's in our DNA, it's looking at how this life form has developed through a one-celled type of life form and bacteria all the way through evolution, and how a life form becomes what it becomes is due to behaviors over time, over millions of years, over like hundreds and thousands of years. Behavior that is being repeated by a life form for generations will become part of the DNA. That's the purpose of DNA, is to store information of like how to operate, you know, how the body should work, but also how to behave in the world, and how to survive and how to be successful at it. So all behaviors that are natural to humans and everything humans do and everything in our brain is a result of an evolutionary process of millions of years. And you know, the modern human has existed for several 100,000 years, and even during that time span, behaviors and practices that have been successful and ways of thinking and emotions all have become part of the DNA, which means it's just part of how the life form operates. Because as you know, when it comes to evolution, successful behavior will become dominant because the rest will die, right? The most successful behaviors, the most successful programmings will then spread. And therefore, over time, that will become what this life form and other life forms are. And it's not just like certain things, it's absolutely everything. So I often point to behaviors and ways of thinking and programming and all that, because even as people on spiritual journeys, people have a tendency to underestimate how much in our minds and how we experience things and what we do, how much our DNA is actually in control. It's also part of what I teach people, to both understand the human life form and the human psychology, human biology, the human brain, and even human consciousness, to understand what kind of car we're driving, and also be able to then separate the spiritual consciousness from that whole thing that we incarnate into. And that takes time. It takes a lot of practice to be able to not necessarily peel that away, but to, even in your brain, be able to recognize the difference. So almost everything that people believe to be, oh, that is just me, I'm just doing this thing, this is just how things work, that is part of how your DNA operates. So that's why I often talk about it, because I find it important to remind people that the human brain consists of programs, and only programs. The aware part of the brain, is less than 0.1% of your brain. The rest of our brain are programs, most of them created throughout evolution. And then you have a tiny part of your brain representing active awareness. And this is where the spiritual process happens. So this is like where it comes in. And you can then transform even your brain over time, but it takes a staggering amount of work.
So we've heard tonight that Islam, Judaism are more harmonious in some ways, and perhaps in combination with the Western culture would have been more successful. Should we expect in the coming decades that either Western nations will become more Islamic in their governance and organization, and or should we expect Islamic-dominated countries outside the West to become more dominant on the global stage?
Now, when we look at what's happening around the world, humans are drawn to authoritarian ways of thinking and, that type of leadership, right? Because the world is a confusing place, and we all want to feel safe. We all want to be right. And those types of ideologies will then be popular. We saw the same things in the 1930s. And then after the Second World War, we got a new boost, where people were done with that, and now we are moving on. So we're simply in that phase again, because people are confused and afraid. It will pass. But because of that, for as long as people are in that state of confusion and stress, and the binary part of the mind, or the binary mindset, becomes the default, people will be drawn to these things. But at some point, it will be done. So we can restrict ourselves, we can want to restrict others, and we want that safety, but all forms of safety means incarceration, right? At some point, when you build a fence around yourself, at some point it becomes a prison. And this is what we all, when we talk about the human civilization, what we will discover. And we will have to choose the unknown and love it. But then more advanced souls would have incarnated. So it's moving in that direction, yes, but we, again, have to be very patient and loving and compassionate with where we are at this point and how difficult it could be for people who have not started their process of awakening. Because then you connect and you can understand, oh, I am here, this is mirroring me, I'm walking my path, but I do not kind of belong here. I belong here as a space of learning, but I've incarnated in many other places, and I will again. This is one school. Now we'll move on to different schools. So we get more relaxed about everything, and we focus on how can I develop myself, how can I unfold myself and my qualities and my skills, and how can I be a positive force in the world. But for many people, they're not there yet. So they seek these fences, not understanding that we will all be, imprisoned as the result. Again, we saw it in the 30s, and we see it now. It will pass. So it's a phase, and it happens every time collectively people feel that this has gone too far. It's simple that it's too much evolution, too much expansion. And then we take one step back, and sometimes that's a good thing, right? Just like in the West, when we look at, all this kind of ego stuff that we're seeing now, it's very immature and it's very harmful. And then maybe a little bit more of traditional family values is a good thing. Not instead, but to kind of put a little bit of that into the mix. Right? And for a civilization, that can be healthy. Remember, even our civilization is an organism, and it wants to survive. and the Western world is about to implode. So, you know, it needs an injection. And we can learn from different cultures, and even Islam, even, you know, African cultures and Asian cultures. And we need to take the best from all cultures, all parts of history, and treat it with intelligence. Right? This is how we build the global consciousness and the global culture. Take the best of everything we've done so far and build on that, regardless of where it comes from. Because if it works, it works, and we have to reinvent it into the kind of new world. Humans will do that. This is what the next couple hundred years will be about. And it's already started, and it's working. And this is why, again, so many people are afraid, because they feel they're losing their grip on the world and their control and their definition. Everything is changing so fast. So it's natural that people want to fence themselves in for a while, but then it gets boring, and then we move on. Any more questions?
Well, we do have a question about, it's a little bit off topic, if that's okay. Alkvirj had a second question wondering about which process, or an interesting concept, which permission slip can we kind of turn in when we're trying to be more open to channeling information and flow?
Now, but I think it's important when we actively want to open up more, it's to look at our intention. Because too often we can move into the ego state where we want to either feel important and that we have access to something others have no access to. I think it's the permission slip, if we want to open up, is to recognize that we're all the same. Whatever you open yourself to is already available to everyone. Nobody's special. What makes us special is that we're not. We're all part of the same. We're all oneness. And it's just using, I think the technique is to use whatever comes through you and see it in others. See that it's already there. Because when we channel, when we get access to more information, it should change our vibration. It should change our mindset, our behavior, so that we can see others more clearly. So we can see that, oh, right, there is more to this person than I thought. There is more to this than I thought. The world is more wonderful and loving than I thought. Because you can only see what you vibrate. You can only see what is in harmony with your own consciousness. So, understanding when something is unlocked in you, it's for you to see that it already exists in the world around you. And the reason why you couldn't see it was that you were blind. The ego is creating this sort of, ooh, I've access to something special. I'm so powerful and important now, and let me tell everyone so they can admire me. It's that bullshit, right? Most people have to go through that. And more seasoned spiritual students, they're just roll their eyes, oh, another one, he'll get through it, right? Because once you're done with that, you move more into what I just described. So I would advise you to try to go there immediately and just see that it's about you getting access to what can help you out of your misunderstandings, so you can see more clearly what is already in the world, what is already in others. I often say that enlightenment is not that you are filled with light, but that you can see the divine light in others. You understand that everything is of God, and you behave accordingly. It's not about you becoming more, but seeing that everything is one. So all transformation spiritually in us should also transform how we see the world around us and how we relate to it. Because ultimately, high level consciousness means that you are interacting with God in everything. You don't see the limitations and where someone is and his problems or whatever. You see through that. You see, this is divinity that is trying to unfold, right? When you see a beautiful flower that is just starting to unfold, and you know what kind of flower it is, you can see the petals, and you just admire it, right? It's not like there's anything wrong with it because it hasn't like opened up completely. You're just enjoying the process and you're loving it because you understand the flower, right? So a higher level of consciousness should be that we anticipate the growth and the healing and the love and the oneness of God in everything. So we treat it from that perspective. You don't treat it based on their shortcomings and their resistance and their pain. You behave as everything is already enlightened. Because what we go through in our evolutions and our journeys is simply peeling away the misunderstandings and regaining consciousness and starting to remember everything we have forgotten, because we are all divine beings to start with. And the whole journey is about moving into the full realization. But it is parallel with you seeing the same in the world around you. So the ego will always create these imbalances. First, we think that we get filled and then we're very special, and over time that will kind of deflate and we'll start recognizing it in the world around us. And then we do it again. So a more mature spiritual traveler will already know this and make sure that the transformation transforms how we relate to the world. Now we see everything as more divine every day, and that we behave the way we would when, we're facing God, basically. And it's always trying to be in a state of love and compassion and patience with ourselves and with others. And always see our growth and evolution as a joyous thing, right? It's the flower unfolding. And also seeing this in our society, this is also, religion. When you look at humans having existed for at least, 300,000-400,000 years, and before that, there were more in the kind of, simpler primate state. The religions humans have had now for a very short time, historically, it's just a very short time. The life form is going through its evolution and its unfoldment. And humans, 200,000 years from now, will be something very different from what it is now. So our consciousness is always moving, always growing. But it's fun to look at where we are and how to deal with our own journey, because we chose to incarnate on this planet, in this life form, in these times, in various countries and cultures and belief systems and whatnot, because they represent our exact point of evolution. And then it's a matter of today to see how fast and how fun can I make my journey? Can I actually grow beyond my own kind of expectations? Because a lifetime is very short. And you have, in a way, the default setting, right? So no matter what happens, you will grow somewhat. But you have potential for so much more. You can grow so much faster today. You can transform beyond belief, literally. And modern spirituality is about trying to reach that level where we grow faster and where we're able to move beyond even human consciousness and human behavior and human patterns. But to do so, we need to understand it. We need to understand the human journey, the human culture, human history, and love it, and understand how we can utilize that in our own growth. Being a human in the human journey is not the enemy, it's the solution. And we need to love everyone. We need to be compassionate and empathetic and truly see the spiritual journeys no matter how they occur. So we should never have a bias. I prefer this or that, everyone else is wrong. We need to not be binary the way humans are today. We need to see that everything is valuable every expression is valid. Because when someone does something, it's because that's where they are and that's what they need. As a spiritual traveler, we always need to nurture that, to love that, to respect that as a default, and then explore it. There is nothing wrong with anything ever. And there is nothing right about anything either. It's just this organism exploring itself and expanding. And so are you. And in the same way, you need all the space in the universe and all freedom. You need the love of others. You need the help of others. You need to be in all these different kind of networks and organisms of life. So do everybody else. We're all trying to evolve to our maximum potential and try to see that, see beyond cultural differences, religious differences, because they're just like different preferences when it comes to expression. It's the unfoldment. And sometimes when you look at several identical flowers, they will unfold differently. That petal over there, that one over there, and that's really what we're dealing with here. Different variations in how to be human. But overall, it's the same journey, and we're sharing it. So learn to nurture it and love it, and be enthusiastic about all these variations. We're not supposed to be on the exact same journey. We're here to do us, which means we need many different variations and solutions and ways of thinking and beliefs, because we're all on different levels of consciousness and different levels of evolution, which means we need different spaces, right? So give space, nurture the spaces, respect them, and marvel, at all these variations available to humans and their journeys. So, Islam will not take over the world. It will take over a certain space of religion because people want it and they need it. But for those of you, seeking a kind of freer path and a path to awakening, you're way beyond that. So it will not affect you at all. It will just give you an opportunity to love and respect and give space. Because that's also how we show that we are more advanced. It's how we show that, we've actually learned something on our path. It's to understand that everybody needs to go through whatever it is to achieve growth in their own specific way. So all religions are valuable in that context. Everything we do is about the same thing, achieving maximum growth. So in your own life, have patience and compassion with yourself. Recognize that you are a religious being too. Even if you think that I'm not religious, you are. Just look at how you think and your patterns and your behaviors, and you will see religion. And it's okay. It's part of the human journey. But open your heart and see this kind of historic shift on the planet as this enormous flower finally opening. And it will take about 200 years, but it is happening. And in the meantime, a lot of people are wondering what's happening, and they will cling to the old, but they will let go at some point, because there is no turning back, and evolution only moves in one direction, and that's forward.
Thank you so much, IKYA, for such a rich, deep, insightful evening. And thank you for all of our contributors with questions and perspectives tonight. Thank you all for joining us. This has been IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective. And again, the only news program in the world bringing you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. And we look forward to seeing you again next week at 7 o'clock. We have a very important topic on animal exploitation and abuse, but also animal communication and welfare and our primitive but evolving relationship with animals. So please join us next week for that important conversation. Also follow IKYA on YouTube and all the social media, ikya.official. Be sure to subscribe to IKYA here on YouTube, like this video, and perhaps most important of all, please share IKYA Live with anyone who might benefit. You know, this is really an effort to elevate and lift the consciousness of discussion of global events. And we can only do that and only have a greater impact by sharing it with others. So please do that. And then please bring your questions and comments and join us again next Monday at 7 o'clock Oslo time for IKYA Live. Until then, be well.